Hey guys, welcome to 1.6. We're wrapping up chapter 1 where we're going to introduce and talk about functions. And we're specifically going to be talking about functions as rules and tables. We will continue to talk about functions in the next section, but we're going to specifically look at just setting up the rule of the function and the function as a table. So your I will learn statement, I will learn to represent functions and rules and tables, and to be able to identify the domain and the range. So we have 3 vocabulary words. Function is a relationship between 2 sets of numbers. For every input of the function, there must be a unique output. So for every input, there must be one and only one output. So again, a function is a relationship. That relationship is between numbers. Whether it be 2 numbers or 10 numbers or an infinite amount of numbers, it's just a relationship between those. The domain is part of a function. The domain we also call inputs and x values. We'll be able to switch out how we say that. Those are 3 different words that mean the same set of numbers. So a set of numbers could be, it could just be the set 1, 2, 3. It could be an infinite amount of, it could be an infinite set, but it is the set that we're going to put into our function, or the x values of our function. The the range is the set of numbers that we call the outputs, or the y values. We'll be able to interchange how the name for that. So we use x and y because we can write all of our input-output values as ordered pairs or coordinate. So remember, we write coordinates as x, y coordinates. So whenever you see a ordered pair like this, we're always going to have the domain as the x value and the range as our y value. So again, those are our 3 vocab words for this section. Oh, I totally forgot about this one. Words or phrases used to describe operations. Because we're going to see word problems and things like that, these are really important to have down. You don't necessarily have to write them down again, although it wouldn't hurt. Different words for addition: sum, plus, added to, increased by. Subtraction, we have minus, less than, decreased by, sorry about my handwriting on this, times, of, per, product, quotient, divided by. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but you have to be able to pull out those keywords immediately out of a word sentence or a verbal phrase. Here we have sum, plus. Those are all of our addition. We have difference, minus, less than. Some of these are getting a little more complicated. What I want you to do is kind of pause the video and see if you can match the sentence to the verbal phrase. This would just be more practice. The better you are at this, the easier those word problems are going to be. Okay, so I'll fast forward through this to keep the video short, but be able to add or combine, match the word sentence to its verbal phrase. Okay, going back to domain and to range. The domain, your textbook will ask you to identify the domain or the range of a set of numbers, of a function, of a relationship. So here is a table. This is considered a function. We'll get into whether it is or isn't later, but you might see it as a table, as a t-chart, but it's a relationship between numbers, between x and y. They're going to ask you to identify the domain and the range. So the domain contains all of those numbers called the inputs, or the x values. So if you look at our table, over here on the left are our x values. So all you would have to do is to list, hey, my domain is just the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 50. So this would be the answer to that question, what is your domain? My Flash player doesn't work on Show Me, so you have to ignore that. So that's all you'd have to do, domain, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 50. You do the same thing for the range. The range contains all of the numbers or values called the outputs. So if this is my function, or the table that was given to me, remember range are called the outputs or the y values. So therefore, all I would have to write down is my range 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. These are my values, or those are the numbers in the range. So that would be the answer. So again, domain are my x values, range are my y values. All I was doing was listing them, identifying. So here, let's actually use a function to find a range that's not given to us. So the question is the domain of the function y equals 2x. So here's my function, they gave it to me. My function is y equals 2x. This is the rule of the function. The domain is 0, 2, 5, 7, and 8. So here's my domain or my inputs. They want us to make a table for the function and identify the range. So this would be, make sure that this goes in our examples. So in order to identify the range or to figure out my outputs, I'm going to take the value of my input and plug it into my function. Now remember, we said our inputs are also called our x values. So therefore, I'm going to take that number and substitute it in for x into my function. So my rule is 2 times x. So my output is the same as 2 times 0, which is just 0. I'm going to do the same thing for every value. 2 times 2, I'm just plugging it into my function. It's 4. Plugging 5 into my function is 2 times 5. It's 10. 2 times 7 is 14. 2 times 8, 16. So therefore, the values of my range, my output, or my y values, my range is going to be 0, 4, 10, 14, 16. Okay, all I did is I took my input values, my x values, and I substituted into my function 2 times x, or 2 times my input. So therefore, my output values are 2 times what I put in. So my range would be 0, 4, 10, 14, and 16. Here, this one doesn't work as well on Show Me because it looks kind of cool once you do it on the smartboard. So if I were to take these values for my domain, again, this is another example you should be writing down, and I'm going to plug them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 50, and 100. The question is, what is the rule of the function? So here, I'm going to give you 3, 7, sorry, that's not 7. This one is 5, this one is 7, this one is 9, 11, and then 200, oh sorry, that should be 1,000. 2001. So here your textbook or the question gave us our inputs and outputs. They gave us the function. I want to know what the rule of the function is, or what is the relationship between my domain and my range. So you have to kind of look for a pattern. This one's a little more difficult, but what do I do to my input to get my output? Hopefully you kind of noticed it as I was doing it. But my rule for this one, y is equal to 2 times my input plus 1. So every time I put in a number, I multiplied it by 2 and then added 1. You might want to look to see if the function increased by a certain number or if you had to multiply by a particular number. It's really just being able to identify the pattern. Your textbook will give you a couple simple ones to start, and then this is probably a more complicated one. Last slide. What we're going to do here is we're going to determine whether the pairing is a function. So here we have two functions, and the question is it a function? For every input, do I have exactly one output? So I need to look at, for the input of 3, I have an output of 1. So you have to look through the rest of the function to determine, do I have an input of 3 and does it give me an output other than 1? And I don't. So you have to do that for every single number within your function. So here I have an input of 6 and an output of 2. Remember, for every input has to have only one output. So here the input of 6 has an output of 2. That's the only output that 6 gives me. Here I have an input of 9 with an output of 2. Now if you look, both 6 and 9 have an output of 2. However, they can have the same output, but the input of 6 only has 1. The input of 9 only has 1. So yes, this is a function, because every input has only one output. They may have the same output, but it's only one. Down here, the input of 2 has an output of 0. The input of 2 has an output of 1. So the input 2 has two separate outputs. So this is not a function, because the input of 2 has two separate outputs, not one unique output. Okay, so that's our lesson for today. Make sure that we have our notes and everything ready to go, and I'll see you guys in class.